So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jeremy. I am the host of the Hadera Savannah Creative Coast Meetup, so brought to you by Creative Coast. And we're honored to have Andrew Antar of Tune.fm this week. So thanks, Andrew, for joining us. I really appreciate it. I want to give a quick shout out to our distinguished guests here. Thanks for joining us. We've got a pretty good crowd here going. So, back when I was having I get better attendance with the virtual meetups than I did with the physical meetups. It's difficult sometimes to draw people in a community, especially a small community like Savannah, to draw them into a specific technology like Hadera. It's difficult to get a good crowd around those meetups. So oftentimes we would have some pretty slim attendance, but we've got some great attendance here. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. So again, my name is Jeremy. I am one of the co-founders of Ledgerama. Ledgerama is a company that's devoted to building trust online. We're currently working on a digital wallet called Walla Wallet, and Walla Wallet's going to be coming out fairly soon here. We're in the middle of the alpha launch currently. We're looking at closed beta, and we're waiting on some approval on the approval process to go through, so we can get our wallet application available in the Google Play Store. And that's Walla Wallet, if I didn't mention the name, excuse me. I'd like to introduce my partner Rob too, Rob Keynes. He's the other co-founder of Ledgerama. We've been working together since Hadera 18. So we've come a long ways, and working hard to build that trust online and really provide a premier experience for users of Hedera Hashgraph. And so without any further ado, I will introduce, or I will kind of hand it over to Andrew and let him talk a little bit about himself and Tune.fm. And, of course, we'll get into all the goodies about how you came into the community and, what kind of problems you think Hadera solves for what you want to build and all those kinds of things. It's a big topic too. So I'm very excited. I hope it shows, because Tune.fm is, in my mind, it is the flagship use case for distributed ledger technology. I'm a musician myself. I was a choir kid in church. I was a choir kid all through high school. I played the viola da gamba myself, not at a professional level, but I do play the viola and enjoy it greatly. My partner Rob is a very talented guitar player and is in a band himself. So of course we can get into some of those discussions. I bet we've got some other musicians in the crowd here too, but I am an absolute avid music lover, and so I've always been excited about. Of course, it was Hero.fm back in the day. We've changed gears a little bit now. We're Tune.fm, but the presence is the same, and I think the vision, while maybe evolving, is still the same. So very excited to have you, Andrew. And okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you talk a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for the really nice introduction. It's nice to be considered the flagship use case. I would tend to agree with that. And I've always seen cryptocurrency as an opportunity for music in the industry, which is broken and has been plagued with many issues with regards to payments and fairness. And so being in the music business, a musician myself, I didn't realize you also played viola. I played violin, so I've been in orchestras my whole life, and was working with a lot of different musicians while I was in college, and found it sort of difficult to network with other musicians because people don't necessarily wear a badge like they're at a conference that says I play the trumpet and I want to join a band, or I'm in this band, or I like jazz, or I like this or that. So I thought it would be helpful for musicians to network, to sort of create a music-centric social network where people can actually connect with each other and put music together. So that was the seed of the idea that became Hero. And part of that was creating really rich profiles that enable you to upload your music and share it with other people. And then we got all into the high fidelity audio space of dealing with lossless masters and that whole thing. And at the time, people were still buying albums on iTunes. This was a while ago. And so we wanted to have the sort of direct to fan experience similar to Bandcamp, where you can just buy directly from artists. And then quickly, streaming and Spotify sort of came up out of nowhere, and there was the whole $20 a month for all you can eat. But that was limited to essentially licensed music, which, even though there's tens of thousands of songs, it's still a very small single-digit percentage of the overall content out there. And if you look at things like SoundCloud or YouTube, there's hundreds of millions of songs out there from tens of millions of artists all around the world who are independent. And a lot of that has to do with the licensing structure of things that are sort of geographically siloed. It's very hard to find Indian music or maybe Chinese music or Brazilian music or African music for that matter, just from here. So we wanted to create a sort of global marketplace that was fair, independent, open to both unlicensed as well as licensed, independent artists as well as independent labels, major labels, sort of open to everyone. But as downloading fell out of favor and subscription service became the new norm, it didn't seem like it made sense to charge people a subscription to stream the music that was on our platform. And we were able to gather over 5,000 artists from all around the world, with hundreds of albums and thousands of songs. So we have really great content, and it's all algorithmically sorted. But we're sort of a discovery interface, and we wanted to allow people to just stream that music and not have to sort of put up a payment gateway or a payment wall, a barrier to entry, because we don't have the 30 million song catalog or whatever it is that Spotify has. So essentially, we wanted a way to monetize streaming, sort of a pay-as-you-go model where you're only paying for consumption, and it's all sort of taken care of in the browser. You're not authorizing payments. And we explored having a credits, sort of internal credits that you would buy. But as sort of crypto became big in 2017, it became obvious that the best way to create these credits would be to create our own cryptocurrency. Why not? And sort of the idea of tokenizing the marketplace. So we had a fiat-based marketplace with credit cards hooked up, and you could buy an album and it would pay out to the artist. And that was very complex just to deal with, the fiat-based marketplace of dealing with legacy bank code to send them batch transfers to artists. There wasn't really, like, Stripe only handled merchants, like one merchant at a time. You couldn't have unlimited merchants of people who just sign up to be able to sell their own stuff. So it was actually not as simple as one might think. But crypto sort of solved all these problems and got rid of transaction fees and 3% and 30 cents for every transaction. And it enabled us, hypothetically, to be able to just sort of play around with the application, start streaming music and not worry about it, not have to deal with payment or anything. And this idea of streaming micro payments for every second of music was super attractive to us. And the ability for all that to happen seamlessly in the browser under the hood and not have to really deal with anything. That was sort of the holy grail of what we wanted, where you can sign up, maybe get a reward, start streaming music. The payments are going directly to the artist as it's happening in real time. And so we saw that as a sort of new model for media consumption. And you could apply that to reading the news or watching videos, but we wanted to focus specifically on music because that's, looks like Pablo has a question. Can you stream by second today? Yes. So essentially what we have today is that. So we wanted something that would happen seamlessly, where down to the second, essentially. It doesn't need to be millisecond because it's sort of negligible difference. But basically, the exact amount of content that you're consuming should be accounted for, and that exact amount of value can be transferred, no matter how small, whether it's fractions of a penny, to the artist. And so we decided, long story short, to tokenize, and we're looking for either a way to. We're originally going to just fork something and build our own coin, right?
Yeah.
And so we're looking at a bunch of different things, and then of course Ethereum has the ERC20 tokens, and the vast majority of the hype in 2017 was around ERC20 tokens, and virtually every new company was launching a token, but it was all sort of based on Ethereum, and this idea of programmable money was very attractive. So but looking into Ethereum, it seemed like the fees would sometimes skyrocket to $5 for a transaction. Sometimes I think even now it's like $2.40 or something. And there's congestion, and then there's things slowing down, and sort of all of these scalability issues of Ethereum really came out around that time. And everyone said, well, we all know Ethereum's not scalable, but it will be once Casper and this and that comes out and blah, blah, blah. And so, like, who knows when that's going to happen? And what if it gets forked into something where, like, Ethereum Classic, and then we're built on something that becomes like a defunct blockchain that nobody uses? So we looked at Steem. Steem was super attractive because that was sort of one of the only decentralized applications that actually worked, that had a significant amount of microtransactions. And they released something, said that they're going to do this media token, and that so anyone could create their own token that was sort of a Steam-like application. And I actually went to a talk with one of the co-founders of Steem, one of the lead developers, and he did a sort of deep dive over several hours into how it's architected. And the more I learned, the more I was wanted to get away from it. That's a whole nother talk, but just the way it worked, there was sort of 4 cryptocurrencies working together, and there was a lot of broken things, and it wasn't for us. And the media token that they were talking, the smart media token, SMTs initiative, that they had announced and did all this social media for, was essentially also defunct. That just wasn't happening. And even the lead developer is like, yeah, I'm not even sure if that's even happening. That's why I didn't talk about it. So I was like, well, that's that. We looked at Stellar. But anyway, I saw this video, Hidden Secrets of Money. It was going viral at the time. And that's how a lot of people found out about Hashgraph. So found out about Hashgraph. A bunch of people are guilty. And this was like when Hashgraph was really early stages. Like, it looked very, not shady, but like they clearly didn't have a graphic designer. It was just Lehman and swirled, and it looked like early 90s type of stuff, but the math seemed really good, and the architecture seemed really good, and it just felt like a more elegant solution to distributed computing. And the way its efficiency and the math proofs behind the consensus, how it's ABFT, and all the things that we know and love about Hadera, which is why we're here. I'm sure I don't need to go through everything, but basically sort of went down the Hadera rabbit hole at the time, watched all the videos.
So for the folks that I'm not sure. So for the folks that aren't, that aren't Haderans or Hadarians or whatever it is, Lehman's Legions or whatever we've been declared. If you could just take a brief second to talk about about what it is that Hadera does that makes it special, and why it became despite the rough look initially there, what it is, what problem, essentially what problem it solves, right?
Yeah, so I mean, all the issues that we had with blockchain were sort of magically solved with this Hedera DAG, right? And and I guess like people compared it to IOTA because that's a DAG as well. And they had this sort of the strangle or whatever they call their consensus. But it wasn't necessarily like even proven that it was a consensus. They have a huge white paper, but then a bunch of smart people decided that it wasn't real with IOTA. And whereas with Hadera, they had a DAG, but it actually did check out, right? And so the consensus was real. And because it wasn't a blockchain, it's sort of just a way faster inherently faster moving architecture, and the fees were a lot less because you're doing a lot less computation. There's no mining, sort of all the issues with fees going through the roof and things slowing down and things being slow by design and things being really heavy and clunky. You know, we want it very light, fast micropayments. So in a way, even though we really wanted to get into crypto and tokenize, all the existing cryptocurrency and blockchain sort of tech out there was really slow and clunky, in many ways worse than fiat. I mean, higher fees than fiat.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous.
Slower. Yeah.
I'll just say real quick. I mean, as non-tech, or at least not a developer. I mean, I'm a techie, but not a developer. My first experience with Bitcoin was sweeping a paper wallet, right? And this was at a high transaction time, but it was just there was $80 worth of Bitcoin on this paper wallet that had been in my roommate's wallet. So he had it in his physical wallet since he'd had it forever. I mean, it was, waterlogged and, but anyway, so it was, it was difficult to scan. It was tough to get the QR code off the thing, but long story short, it cost me so it was $80 approximately worth of Bitcoin. Cost me $10 to sweep the wallet and took over 24 hours. That was my first experience. And so, amidst all the hype and everybody's loving blockchain and it's going to solve all these problems, I went, well,
this really sucks. Yeah. Like dial-up internet, it's really, it felt terrible. And in many ways worse than fiat, which is doing 50 million transactions a minute or whatever it was. And 3 cents and 30 cents, 3% and 30 cents was still much lower than Ethereum and Bitcoin transactions, which those fees could change based on congestion. So why should my business model have to be affected by third-party congestion that has nothing to do with me? So all of a sudden my fees go up 10x because some random people or random apps are using the same currency. So that whole idea of dynamic fees was very unattractive. But Hashgraph seemed to, on the outset, sort of solve all those problems. The only problem is that Hashgraph didn't really exist yet publicly. It was just and it could have been like any other crypto scam like out there where they say we're quantum proof, we're this, we're that, we're blah blah blah. And there was a lot of stuff like that out there. But actually, the fact that Hadera wasn't sort of professionally put together with marketing and designers, it looked more legitimate because it was less polished, right? And
flashy.
So
it was so flashy. There's a lot of flash.
It was just like, we only care about the math. We only care, like, read our 80-some page white paper and then talk to us type of deal. Right. And so I actually called up somebody, I believe it was Paul Madsen, and I had a lot of questions about how the consensus worked in the rounds. I really wanted to sort of understand it down to the bare bones, and talk to him for like 2 or 3 hours and get all my questions answered just from a technical architecture standpoint. How does this thing work? But the main question I really had was, theoretically, if there was a public ledger, would I be, and it's programmable, would I be able to deploy my own token on this amazing, architecture that we're calling Hashgraph, and basically get all the benefits of the ABFT consensus, the speed, the low fees, what have you, the same way that ERC20 is a protocol on top of Ethereum, but it's on top of a terrible blockchain. I mean, I don't want to, say anything bad about Ethereum, but comparatively, a token on top of Hadera felt a lot better than a token on top of Ethereum. And it didn't have all those issues. So that was sort of the goal from the outset was, is it technically possible to build a token protocol on top of Hedera, on top of Hashgraph? Hedera didn't exist. And so I got some sort of indications that just give us a few months and we're announcing something huge from some of the Hedera guys or some of the Hashgraph guys. And I was like, all right, we'll give it a few months. And lo and behold, a month or two later, they announced they're going to have this event in New York. And I'm an affiliate, so I'm pretty close. So I decided to go. And there I was like in the front row. I remember like Lehman talking and all the Hashgraph people were there. And they announced not only are we announcing a public ledger called Hadera, but we're also going to launch with it the Ethereum virtual machine and therefore a smart contract service. So you can write smart contracts on top of a public ledger that's based on Hashgraph. So I was sort of through the roof. That was everything I wanted to hear. And they even teased a music micropayments use case in that initial 30-second video that they were promoting when they announced. So I was pretty excited about that. And like directly after the announcement, I sort of ran over to Lehman near the stage and I was like, hey, we're doing the music thing, like the thing in the video, like that's actually what we plan to do. We already have a music streaming platform with thousands of artists and we want to tokenize, we want to use Hadera. And he's like, that's great. Talk to this guy, that guy was like Alex and a few other people. And he told me who to talk to. So we sort of, we had some back and forth with the Hadera team, signed some paperwork, had an official partnership set up, and we're sort of off to the races. Like, let's figure out how we can build this thing. So we started, basically building our new website that would talk about the tokenization, more of a splash page about the token and Hadera and why we. Hello?
We having some kind of, okay, well, hopefully that was a brief interruption there.
No worries. And then we got invited to speak at Hedera 18. And at the time it was still very early because we hadn't actually built anything. We only sort of had plans to build on Hadera because nothing was even available. None of the SDKs were open. It was very much like, we're working on this right now and it's going to be awesome and it's going to have all these features, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. So we sort of planned and came up with an architecture for the initial goal was to just run a vanilla ERC20 contract on top of the smart contract service on Hadera and see what happened. We didn't know what would happen, whether that would work or not. But since they had the Ethereum virtual machine, I didn't see any reason why we couldn't. And I knew that there would be issues, but we didn't know what those would be. So we're like, well, let's take the risk and might as well be first and run into all the issues first. And if we solve them, then we're ahead of the game, rather than waiting for other people to do it.
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
I give you a lot of credit for that. That's a bold move.
Thanks. And there was some talk like, well, why don't you just use HBAR? And they already have their own token. And so there's a lot of reasons why we wanted our token to sort of have control over the supply, over the pricing, over everything, and the ability to incentivize different things within the marketplace, like signups and curating. And it is more about control of having our own token, just like any other dApp that launched a token on Ethereum. There's so many more tools that you have at your disposal. And the other thing is that if we wanted to award HBAR to anyone, we would have to come out of pocket and purchase that on an exchange and sort of just hand it to people. So we were very adamant about building our own token. The ideal was, or at least the assumption was, is that because Hedera is light years ahead of Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum blockchain in general, that the fees would be better, even if they were worse than pure HBAR, that it would be faster, even though if it was slower than pure HBAR, but it would be way faster than Ethereum or Bitcoin. It would be somewhere in the middle, and that was fine. As long as we had sort of bank grade ABFT consensus, and fees that were low enough or reasonable enough to work with our business model. So anyway, made that whole speech at Hedera 18. That's where I met Pablo, actually. You were there in the hackathon. And also met Mark Chang from Mind Fund, who started the Helix Accelerator. And he was like, hey, we want you in our accelerator. Like, let's work something out. So I was like, cool, yeah. We're raising money, so let's do it. And so we basically worked out a deal with the Helix Accelerator, and we joined. That was a few months later, in Hong Kong, basically. And the idea with Helix was basically there's going to be all this code being released by Hadera and all the SDKs, and we're going to be able to build everything, and we'll be the first generation of dApps running on Hadera, and Helix is going to be the sort of Hedera-like VC accelerator type thing. And it's going to be great. So we're like, all right, cool. And so we did that. And so I actually wrote a whole blog post recently called Scaling Smart Contracts on Hadera. So if you've read that, you'll hear a lot of the similar story. But that sort of, I mean, I talked a little bit about how we came to Hadera, but most of that post is that from that point onwards of like, once we actually started building on Hadera, like what happened every step of the way. And so the first thing is that we couldn't use the Python SDK because it was essentially, and our whole app is in Python. So we wanted to use the Python SDK, and the Python SDK was compiled by the Rust SDK, and all the other languages that were compiled from the Rust SDK were like far behind the Java SDK. And it seemed like Java was the only real SDK that actually worked. So we had to build, we dropped the Python one, and we decided to build a Spring API wrapper around the Java SDK to be able to interact with it, because we didn't have any sort of Java in our backend. So we sort of wanted to build this very simple REST API, like where we can basically hit all the functions within Hadera in the Java SDK, which the Java SDK is what actually calls protobuf and actually interacts with Hadera directly. And so we did the Spring API, and we sort of deployed a vanilla ERC20. And it was very limited because we can only have one user send tokens to one other user. There was no way to have multiple users at the time. It was very early on, so like the SDK hardly worked. It was still a 0 point something. It was very much in beta. But literally the day of demo day, we were able to demonstrate micropayments for streaming. So you can play a song and see the token transferred from one to the next. You can only play one artist, and we were able to actually generate jam tokens on the testnet. So it was real, testnet tokens actually being transferred based off of playing music, and based on the amount of seconds that you play of the song, it does a calculation for how much jam it should transfer. So we were pretty excited to show that. But sort of after Helix, we were back to square one because there was a new update to the SDK that came out that literally broke everything. So we had to sort of rebuild everything from the ground up and over the summer. And our goal was to be deploy on day one of open access. So we had a few months to get everything ready, and open access was September 16th.
Right.
And so we worked really hard and got everything sort of built and working and on testnet, and we ran into a bunch of stuff that you can read about, like different errors and things you read about in that blog post. But basically, we were able to actually deploy on mainnet. We got early access to a mainnet account, 900 account, and we did our token generation event, and we had it all wired up to the site. And within the same minute that OA went live, we hit the switch on our thing, and we went live as well, and everything worked, and it was great. And so I thought we were in the clear to just sort of focus on marketing and scale it up and see what happens. But a few days later, we started getting all these errors, and we're like, well, what's going on? Nothing's working. Everything's broken. And the problem was we had no way of knowing what these errors were, because there were errors being thrown by the EVM, but the reason for the error wasn't being read out. So it was like, we get a bunch of errors. We have no idea why they're not readable. There's no indication of what's causing this. So we're just trying a bunch of things and trying to see what would stop it. And it turned out that these were fee errors. We weren't paying enough in HBAR fees. We're like, well, we were given the amount in testnet. It was totally different. It was like, you pay 20,000 tiny bar or whatever it was, and that'll work for literally everything. But we got this fee schedule from Hadera, and it was totally different from testnet, and we're unsure of how accurate it was because it was changing, and you had to simulate what the fees would be. And it turned out, because the price of HBAR unfortunately tanked in those first 3 days of trading around 80%, from like 12 cents down to 2 or 3 or 4. The actual fees were pegged to a fiat-based price, but they were payable in HBAR. So if you think about, if your fee's 1 penny and HBAR is 1 penny, then it's 1 HBAR. But if, you know, HBAR is worth 10 cents, you got to have 10 HBAR. So the amount of HBAR we owed for these fees skyrocketed like 4 or 5x. And so we had to build a bunch of dynamic fee estimation stuff just to get it working. And there's a lot more complexity there that I'm skipping over. But Hadera did provide some updates that would make it a little bit easier to estimate fees and whatnot. And so, and then everything was going great. And we were then focused on uploading this massive catalog from Matthew Knowles. We did a deal with Music World Entertainment, and Matthew Knowles is Beyonce's father. So he actually has some rights to some live instrumentals from Beyonce. So we did this whole bulk uploading system, and it's for mostly for labels and independent labels, where we can ingest a ton of content and publish a lot of different pages automatically rather than user generated. So that was a big lift, and we finally got that done and deployed this whole catalog for the first time. And we're like, hey, we have some really great news. And so we started doing some marketing, working with some PR folks, and we got a few articles that said, you know, Beyonce live instrumentals are now on this new crypto streaming thing, Tune FM, check it out. And obviously Beyonce being the #1 celebrity in the world, that brought a lot of interest. And so we had thousands of people coming in every day, signing up, creating wallets.
So I have to ask, how did that relationship materialize? If you can get into that at all, how did that? I mean, for a techie classical musician, how did that relationship materialize?
It's sort of a long, winding story, but in short, we were talking to somebody who was potentially looking at buying our company, sort of acquiring, they're sort of a media company with a public shell. And either way, this guy happened to be very well connected with artists and other sort of music industry folks. And he was like, well, I can connect you. He's like, I want to go straight to the top. Beyonce, I know Matthew Knowles, blah, blah, blah. And sort of the acquisition thing didn't work out because their funding didn't work out, but he wanted to help us out anyway. And so, and this was, it's funny actually, I flew down to Houston the day before Hedera 18. So I went Houston, then Dallas. So I met Matthew Knowles like literally the day before.
Okay.
And so we went to his office. So the introduction was made and we set up a meeting and flew down there. And he's this really cool office. He manages like dozens of artists. And he has, thousands and thousands of Grammy Award of songs and dozens of Grammy Award winning artists on his label, including Solange and Chaka Khan and all this other stuff. And we basically wanted him to be an advisor, and he agreed to that. And then at some point he was like, well, I want all my music on your website. Like, why aren't we doing that? I was like, well, we can. Let's do it. Let's get it all up there. That's what I wanted. That was the whole idea. He's like, all right, let's do it. So, and it took some time to like sign all the legal agreements, to have him on the advisory board officially and this and that. But by the time, once we launched Tune FM on OA, then we had a call with them. And he's like, well, let's get all the content up. So that was our focus. So we got all the content up. We announced it. It sort of went viral, whatever, that means really. But we had thousands of people coming in every day. And then we sort of, all of a sudden, everything halted, like came to a screeching halt. Everything was errors all over the place. Nothing worked. Everything broke. And we had no idea what was going on. Like, why is this happening? And it turns out there's actually another incident that I forgot to mention before that. So the reason that it all halted this time was it said, I forget the exact error code, but basically our max state size has been, the max usage of the smart contract, the file storage was exceeded. Yeah, max contract size exceeded. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, the infamous state size. That was,
yeah.
Rob could go into a similar agonizing pain story about the revelation of the state size. But anyway, go on.
Yep. So actually, Pablo just sent me the error code here privately. The max contract size exceeded, and that's the state size. And previously, we had a bleed out event where we lost all of our HBAR. Hadera was nice enough to give us like 10,000 HBAR just for using everything and launching. And this was another fee issue where basically it kept retrying, and after we had built all the estimation functions, it wasn't enough. So it would retry the fees like 15 to 20 times, increasing them every time, and we would lose that HBAR every time it failed because it didn't kick it back to us. So we lost 90% of our HBAR, and we're basically like bankrupt in HBAR. So we had a bailout where they gave us another 10,000 HBAR. Like, sorry, but thanks. So anyway, so we fixed all the fee stuff. We launched the new content. We announced Beyonce, and then we got this max contract size exceeded. The state size of our smart contract was maxed out. We're like, well, what do we do now? So we literally can't add another user to the smart contract. And so we're totally dead in the water, and we had no idea whether it was possible to proceed. So essentially, we're like, well, maybe that means that smart contracts just don't work on Hadera. Like, maybe maybe we made a huge mistake here. But we sort of took a step back. So we had a lot of communication with Hadera team. And we're like, well, we need to stop the immediate problem, which is the 800 kilobyte smart contract file size. Needs to be increased so that we're not completely offline, like dead. And so they agreed to actually do an emergency network upgrade and get it up to 1 megabyte. So we'd have some buffer to sort of buy us time to figure out how do we go proceed from here. because that wasn't a long-term solution at all, but they were able to implement that. And so we had a little bit of a buffer, maybe 20%, where there's maybe a few hundred more accounts that could be added. But we had to shut down all of our marketing, all of our PR, all the stuff that was bringing in users. And so anyway,
I remember that very well. I remember when you guys suddenly turtled up. It was like
yeah,
everything was rocking and rolling. I mean, I know
yeah,
October was this. I mean, I didn't know about the Matthew Knowles prior to the Hedera 18, but of course, Hedera 18 was a big deal too. I mean, the Anatole was so beautiful. I mean, you must have been having some rock star moments there, on your plane flights and just, wow, what is, we're really doing it. We're really taking off. And then suddenly, you start running into all these the klaxons start roaring and the red lights are blinking and you're going, what's going on? Yeah, so I distinctly remember that when it was like all of a sudden you didn't hear anything from heroes. Like, where'd our heroes go? But
yeah. Well, we went dark. We're rocking and rolling, everything's working great, and the small errors with fees and everything, and like, it seemed like a big deal to us at the time, but I knew we had run into things that we didn't anticipate. And that was just sort of the name of the game. The fact that we were on a beta SDK and building something that had never been done before on a DLT that had never had anything like it, its own token. And there was a lot of doubters out there that said like, oh, it's not possible, this and that, blah, blah. We're like, well, we're going to make it possible. So
the price of truth, right? That's something that I heard a number of times. I mean, the price of truth is real. So
yeah,
so it wasn't quite the there's still a lot of work to do. It's, I think,
yeah.
what I've discovered. Not that you can't do it. I love the determination, right? Because intelligence and determination, you got those two in spades, and you're going to make it. But there's but that determination gets tested. So kudos to you for making through it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my approach was, if this is theoretically possible, we're going to brute force our way through and make it possible. So no matter what, we'll make it happen, and we'll see where we are on the other side. Who knows? And small little hiccups here and there, like that's to be expected.
Of course.
And we had all those hiccups, including the bleed out event where we went down to 0. That was sort of dramatic for us. But this was way bigger. It was like, this thing doesn't work anymore. Like, you're completely dead. And, they upgraded the whole Hadera network, specifically so that we weren't dead and we had some time to figure out, what do we do from here?
Shout out to the Hadera team for stepping up and coming to the rescue, for sure.
Yeah, they really helped out with that, both with the bailout and the network upgrade. So that was huge, as well as the fee estimator that wasn't in the plans before. So we're sort of pushing the limit, and I like to say we're on the bleeding edge. And when you're on the bleeding edge, you're gonna have some blood, So it's it's definitely it's a lot harder to be a pioneer with this kind of thing. But that was, that's what we signed up for. So
that's right. I tell Rob that all the time. I say, Rob, you're on the cutting edge of trouble. We've had that bleeding edge conversation, but it's one of those things that I learned pretty quickly on. I'd ask Rob, I'd say, well, why don't you reach out to the community? I'm sure there's solutions out there. And he'd come back to me and say, no, we're still working through it. So to say, wow, we're on the cutting edge of trouble here. So, just keep forging on into unknown territory. But
yeah. And so, we did a lot of sort of team meetings and talking just technical architecture, like why we hit this problem. And the bottom line was, and we still didn't really understand why there was a state size. We're like, well, Ethereum doesn't have this problem. Like, of all the advantages that Hadera had over Ethereum, here was an advantage that Ethereum had over Hadera that caught us by surprise. And we're like, well, they have infinite state. Why is there even the notion of state size? And just understanding why that existed. So the reason is because Hadera is mutable. Everything is sort of stored on the file service, and it's not, the smart contract itself is not distributed across a bunch of different nodes, it's sitting in a file somewhere, and that file needs to have a maximum size so that the consensus time can stay low of 3 to 4 seconds. And so they wanted to keep the consensus down to a few seconds so that they wouldn't open up another attack vector. There's a sort of a few attack vectors where if the consensus takes too long, it sort of opens up this vulnerability as far as they explain it. So, and Ethereum, even though it has this infinite state size, that causes other issues like state bloat. And so the more accounts you have on an Ethereum contract, the slower it operates and the higher the fees. So you're constantly getting slower and slower and more expensive. It was like, well, I guess that is a trade-off, you know, for we want, you know, super fast, consistent fees, consistent speed, but you have this trade-off. You don't have this infinite state where you can just add a few bits to some Merkle tree and then, like, you know, keep adding to the state. So it's basically, you think about Ethereum, it's sort of you constantly adding things on. It's like a Jenga tower. I mean, that's probably a terrible analogy, but you're constantly just smushing things on. It becomes this beast that's unwieldy, and it's not very nimble or efficient at all. But it allows.
I just wanted to, before I forget it, I wanted to harken back to that statement you made about the file being stored somewhere. It's stored somewhere, but it's stored somewhere where in a distributed way, right? So just in case there was any confusion, I just want to make sure that folks are aware that, you know, the file storage service that we're talking about, I mean, it's a distributed file system, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's stored on one computer. That's not about what I meant. So it is distributed, right? But when you distribute a file service, the reason why the file service is expensive is because it costs a lot to have those bytes replicated across the whole world, all these nodes, right?
Right.
But it's in one, I guess, targetable location, right?
Okay.
And so while the file, I mean, I'm not an expert on how the file service is architected. I'm sure there's more complexity there to how it's actually decentralized and stored and whatnot. But the way that the smart contract works is that the smart contract itself is in a file on the file service, and that's different from Ethereum. So there are some key differences from the way that, because Ethereum doesn't have a file service. So the smart contract code is somehow just on the nodes. And so it's stored in many of them. It's decentralized in a different way, but you can't selectively just delete a smart contract on Ethereum the way you can with Hadera. So they're both decentralized, but they're stored in a totally different fashion. So because of that, and because Hadera is a DLT DAG and not a blockchain, these were one of the key differences. And so the state size thing was basically a roadblock for us. So we're looking at it. Well, it looks like our single vanilla smart contract can store with 1 megabyte up to around 10,000 accounts, right? And we're like, well, why don't we just have, like, make a new smart contract for the next 10,000 and the next 10,000? And that was the initial idea of sharding. Well, why don't we just have different shards, right? Hedera, like Lehman kept talking about sharding, like all throughout Hedera 18. That's sort of like this ongoing theme with Hedera, even though Hedera hasn't sharded at all. We're like, well.
And real quick, I just wanted to make sure that everybody out there in internet land, if any of you have questions or comments about any of the technology, or, you know, questions or comments about either, please, you know, pipe in, you know, either raise your hand in the chat, or, you know, or feel free to chime in. I recognize most of the names on that list, so I feel comfortable with folks chiming in if anybody's got any questions. But I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No worries. So basically, the idea was, well, if we're capped at 10,000 users, why not just have a bunch of smart contracts? Like, yeah, it'll be more unwieldy, but you know, as long as we can just go from if we can just fill them up as we fill them up, move to the next, move to the next. So that was the initial sort of sharding concept. But then it was like, well, we still need one central smart contract that everybody communicates with. How are they going to know which shard they're in or which shard to go to? So then we had this idea of a parent smart contract that would sort of be a wrapper and a router around the child smart contract. So all the interaction with the public is with the parent smart contract, and nobody worries about the shards or the children at all, whether they exist at all. And as a transaction is submitted to the parent between two different accounts, one might be in one child and one might be in another, the parent basically routes the transaction to the correct child and facilitates that connection between the token transfer from one child to the next. And so as long as we could submit the transactions to the parent, it could, you know, route transactions between children. But, you know, as simple and as elegant as that might sound, it introduced a whole host of other issues that we had to solve for. So basically, one was the fact that we had a bulk transfer function, which would batch up to 60 transactions, because that was another error that we ran into. I'm skipping over all kinds of random problems.
Well, yeah, and you know,
I'll be here for hours otherwise.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah, that's totally understand.
But you know, I was pretty comprehensive in the blog post. Even that's not 100% comprehensive, but all the highlights. But either way, one of the issues we solved for was there's a max transaction size. So not only was there a max state size, there was a max transaction size for similar issue for speed and security. So the max batch or bulk transfer that we could do, we wanted to have a bulk transfer function to save on fees, because it's one fee for potentially 60 or 100 transactions. We thought we could do thousands. But with that transaction size, we calculated we're limited to 60. But it would still be that one fee divided by 60. It was way better for the business model. But if you have 60 transactions, potentially that could be between more than two smart contracts. And this state size, the way it worked is that the entire body of all the smart contracts involved in the transaction have to be submitted within that 1 megabyte. So we couldn't have 10,000 user shards. We needed to have like 2,000 user shards, and you can only have a transaction between two different child smart contracts. And it also has to fit the parent smart contract. And the parent smart contract also has a state that is keeping track of all the shards, all the child smart contracts. So the way that works is, because the Hadera accounts are incremental in fashion, and they go, it's not just a random string of numbers. It's like 1,001, 1,002. We're able to create ranges. So if you're in between 1,000 and 3,000 on this account number, you're in this shard. And if you're between this range, you're in this shard. And if, you know, the final shard is to infinity, essentially. And we sort of did a logarithmic function within the parent to be able to efficiently find the right shard without having to step through every single shard. And it basically, I mean, there's a whole explanation for how that works, but it was very efficient. Within 2 or 3 steps, you'd be able to get to the right place. And so we needed to have the parent with the shard states fit in the transaction with 2 child smart contract states. So we did a lot of calculation to figure out that essentially we needed half of that 1 megabyte to be the parent, so it could scale up, and the other half to be the 2 children. And so with the bulk transfer, back to that, we needed to batch the bulk transfer, which is a batching mechanism anyway, so that the only transactions submitted in a bulk transfer were ones between 2 different smart contracts, because the moment that you had another third smart contract, it wouldn't fit within that 1 megabyte. So we're batching our bulk transfer essentially. So we architected this whole thing. And there are other issues, like there are max gas fees that they're going to implement, and whether the parent can replicate and create the children, or whether you can create a smart contract from a smart contract. And there are issues with Hadera with the ownership and the auto renew period and a bunch of other stuff, and how to keep track of how many users are in the smart contract so you know when to create another contract. How do you pause the smart contract so you don't corrupt everything when you're creating a new one and adding a new shard? There's a lot of complexity in there and how that works. And we sort of architected this whole thing and created this big document, 20, 30 pages of how this is all going to work. And we're like, well, we want to talk to Lehman to make sure this is kosher and this is actually going to work. And we're not just pie in the sky here. You know, we wanted a sort of sanity test. So we set up a call.
Building stairways to nowhere, stairways to nowhere. That's, big waste of time and resources. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So we set up a call with Lehman and a few others. And we walked through this whole thing, and he was just like, yeah, good. Sounds good. Sounds good to me. Had no problems with anything. And surprisingly, and he's like, yeah, that seems like it'll be infinitely scalable. And I was like, hell yeah, that's music to my ears. I like the sound of infinite scalability. And he essentially gave us the green light and said, this sounds great. Go for it. Try it out. Nothing's stopping you. You have my blessing. And so with that newfound confidence of it was ordained by Lehman.
And when was that, by the way? So give me a time frame on the.
This was, I think, in February.
Okay.
Maybe it was a month or, it might have been January, February.
Okay. Early 2020.
Yeah. And so essentially, we're like, all right, well, let's build this thing. So we finally started building it. And that was also a long, complex process. And we ran into a bunch of other issues, which I won't go into detail on, but essentially we built the sharded smart contract architecture. And around that time, when we're just about finished building it, is when HCS launched. And then everybody was like, well, why don't you just make an HCS token? We're like, well, we already made the smart contract token. We're not going to start from ground zero for the 10th time. And the other thing is, like, it wasn't even clear HCS was still in beta. It wasn't even clear whether it was possible. We talked to Donald about some potential architectures, but essentially at the end of the day, it involved a private token. It's really a private centralized token that has, yes, it has decentralized consensus, but it's a totally permissioned, private, centralized permission network token. Right. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure there's use cases for that. But we wanted something more decentralized. We're talking about a currency. We're talking about something that we want trustless access to, permissionless use of third-party exchanges, third-party wallets, yada, yada, yada. None of that's possible with a private permission token. And so we basically, put HCS aside, like maybe we'll look into it in the future, potentially if we run into another scenario where our token doesn't work or something. But we decided to continue down the sharded token path because it's a true decentralized token using the smart contract service on Hadera. And that was something that hasn't been done before. And we wanted to sort of finish the job. And
the case that you've got, it makes a lot more sense to me. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I interacted with your interface. So it's like, this is so cool. I can zoom in anywhere in the world. And I was just fascinated by the fact that, boom, I could go to South Africa and pick some artist that nobody would, had ever heard of, was totally off the grid, so it fits the ethos a lot. Decentralized and the use case that you're building, it makes more sense. So.
Yeah, you make a great point because our mission has always been to be a global music marketplace that levels the playing field for everyone. Right. So whether you're in Zimbabwe or Uruguay or Malaysia or wherever, your music is just as good as anybody else's. As far as its equality of opportunity, the music itself has to speak for itself, and the algorithms deal with that and how to sort it and how good it is. The quality is based on the listeners, but the ability to just put yourself on the world stage and be accessible and have it out there and allow somebody to find you. And the map feature is critical to be able to just jump around the world and discover local music communities and sort of break down the geographical barriers that are in music inherently. And having the decentralized token, which is a sort of global currency that's permissionless and trustless, very finally fits that mission of the global music marketplace with a global currency, because music is a global language. So we needed a global currency to work with the global language. And so we felt that Hadera was the best thing to build on, and we wanted to have our own token specifically for micropayments for streaming. And so we built this sharded architecture and we deployed it on testnet, and we had some issues with gas, and because the gas coefficients changed, and we thought, it was going to cost. Basically, we thought we weren't even going to be able to deploy the new architecture that we had just built because it was saying that it was going to cost way more gas than was allowed. But it turns out the coefficient was changed, and we were able to actually deploy it successfully. So we finally deployed the new sharded smart contracts on mainnet, and we wired it up to Dragon Glass. So our old smart contract was 0.0.902. You can still see about 25,000 to 30,000 transactions on that old smart contract. But if you go to the Tune FM.
Sorry, just in case there's any questions out there about Dragon Glass, I just wanted to make sure that we, quickly, so Dragon Glass is a mirror node that reflects all the activity that's going on in Hadera. So I just wanted, in case there was anybody out there that, that quick drop of Dragon Glass, of course, us in the community are aware of it, but the different nature of Hadera, and that it's not a blockchain where all the transactions are stored. We use these mirror nodes in order to sort of sweep the information off of the Hadera network. Sorry.
Yeah, so Dragon Glass is a partner of ours, and we wanted to have a third-party explorer to validate all of our transactions, because that's sort of commonplace with any sort of crypto. If you don't have a third-party explorer, you don't have anything. So who knows whether you're just making this all up and it's centralized, So we worked directly with Dragon Glass to unearth our transactions deep in the smart contract code and actually display the J bar or J with dash symbol, which is our Unicode currency symbol, with the amount. So when you sign up, you get 100 jam tokens for free. So if you go to the Tune FM DApp page on Dragon Glass, you'll see a bunch of 100 jam token transfers. There's actually 3 tabs. They added the third one, token transfers. And we're the only one that has this on Dragon Glass. But you can actually see the tokens, the jam tokens transferred. Whereas before it was just like, here's a bunch of byte code for this transaction. We don't know what it is. And we're like, but we want to show the jam amount. And so we work with them and they developed that. So we switched from the old smart contract to the new smart contract. It still works. They have the jam amount. And also even the bulk transfers, if they're hard to find because we run them every so often, but when there's like 0.02 jam or 0.6 jam being transferred, a bunch of different small amounts, those are the bulk transfers, the micro payments for the actual streaming. And that sometimes it's on or off depending on what's going on, but generally that should run every hour as there's streams. So either way, we got all that wired up and we finally launched. And then there was like a bunch of stuff to fix with the actual website because we've been working on all this crypto stuff. A lot of things fell by the wayside with the platform, the product.
Yep.
So I did a whole front end upgrade, mobile web upgrade, visual upgrade, move some things around, make sure the wallet's really nice.
Right.
Link out to, Dragon Glass, stuff like that. So I did a bunch of work on that. And then finally we launched. for a second time, the
Right.
new Tune FM.
Awesome. Great news, and we were all totally excited to see that. I wanted to ask real quick about your plans for this your sharded smart contract solution sounds pretty interesting and innovative. I want to know if there's anything you've got planned with that specifically. I mean, because that in and of itself is a use case, right? So could you talk a little bit about where you see that going in the future?
Yeah, yeah, you make a good point because essentially, as as the blog post makes it really obvious, we've sort of created a new token protocol for Hadera that could be hypothetically used by other people. Currently, we're the only ones using it. But that gave us the idea to create a B2B services side of the business, and at least have a sort of open source thing for other technical and other developers to be able to use a lot of the things that we built. So the first thing that we really wanted to release to the developer community is the Spring API wrapper, because that makes it super duper easy to build anything on Hadera. It's just like using any other API. You don't have to know anything about the SDK, anything about protobuf, anything about any of this complex stuff. You can just use our API, which we would basically open source, and you can interact with Hadera and get all the latest features. And so there's that. Then there's the smart contract component. So interacting with smart contract service on Hadera using the API. And then there's the token service on top of that, which is the sharded token protocol. And most of the code is already open source on the actual smart contract, but
Where can folks go to look at that?
So on Dragon Glass, they actually have the code listed for the smart contract itself.
Okay.
But the smart contract code, while that's a huge portion of it, it's not everything. So we have a whole layer within our application that interacts with the API. And so there's a ton of logic outside of that just to run a token like that in a dApp. It's not just a smart contract working autonomously. You actually have to interact with it. So, and connect it up with your dApp. So there's a huge amount of code, mostly like Node and other things, and Python and Java, but things that are actually interacting with the smart contract to make the token possible. So we're thinking of eventually packaging that up in a sort of Docker container, and creating a subscription service, potentially with HBAR or something else, where another company could basically license the token service and create their own token and use the sharded token and whatnot. And of course, they could use our open source smart contract and build all the other stuff themselves. But in terms of the whole package of running your own token just right out of the box on Hadera, potentially could be a revenue stream and sort of a service, like a SaaS model. That's something we're just exploring in the conceptual phase. We haven't really done anything on that because, it's mostly, it's all proprietary code, obviously, but we're looking at ways, because there's actually 2 or 3 companies already that have reached out to us through Hadera looking to do this. I just got an intro in my inbox literally today from Gehrig about another company. So there's clearly interest in this, in tokens on Hadera. I'm not surprised. And we're the only ones who have it. So, right now we just launched, like, as you probably saw on Twitter, like 2 weeks ago or so, and we've been promoting that. I wrote the blog post, which I've been teasing for a while, but I finally got that done. And then I put out a press release that's specifically about the token. And then I put another musician-focused article about how COVID is affecting live show revenue, and that the new business model for streaming is more necessary than ever. And lo and behold, here we are. We did it. Check us out. And
These
so
are on Medium. These are Medium articles, right?
yeah, all on Medium. Yeah.
Okay, so what's
So
the way for people to find them if they just want to do a quick search?
yeah, so probably the easiest way is to just go on our Twitter, TuneFM Official, and we've linked out to the Medium. So you'll find our Medium.
Okay.
Medium is weird with their URLs. It's still a hero domain, even though the Medium page is TuneFM. They don't allow you to change your actual URL. But it is actually, it's linked on TuneFM in a few places, but it's on Twitter. You can find it.
Great.
So I've been pushing that out there, doing some more press release stuff. And now we're going straight into fundraising. So we're looking to raise a little over $1 million and to actually get to the next step of getting this token to have liquidity. So listed on several exchanges. There's a ton of features we want to build, a bunch of marketing stuff, paid marketing stuff. So right now we're finishing up the sort of initial marketing of the launch and transitioning into sort of fundraising mode. And so from the next few weeks, few months, I'll be heads down with that. And hopefully we'll be able to close a round and take things to the next level.
And if folks watching this would like to reach out to you in that regard, what's the best way to do that?
So my email is Andrew Antar, my name, at hero.fm, but I also have Andrew at TuneFM.
Okay.
So the company is still technically Hero FM. We might change the name. I don't know. But our sort of business corporate website, whatever you want to call it, is still at Hero FM.
Okay.
We might eventually transfer a lot of that over to TuneFM. But the product is TuneFM, and the company is Hero FM. That's currently how we have it.
Okay.
Because we've been Hero for so long, and a lot of people know us as that, so we sort of don't want to leave any of those people out. But once we're fully transitioned over, I sent about 55,000 emails last week to users and people following us and other crypto enthusiasts as part of the marketing campaign. So we're getting everybody on board and sort of transitioning over. And but yeah, you can send me an email at either Andrew at TuneFM or Andrew Antar at hero.fm.
Okay, good. Man, that's awesome. So so one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we start kind of wrapping it up and stuff. I mean, this is what an incredible journey. And so we got a question. Okay, so before so there's a question rolled in about issues signing up. Have you gotten these? So if folks are having issues signing up, what kind of channels can they pursue to
So you can email either me directly and we'll investigate it. Usually has to do with a password issue. But we've tested sign up therapy and it does work. But a lot of times there's issues with, sometimes there's a period in the email and Gmail doesn't actually read periods. It's sort of complicated. But either way, if you're an existing user, when you put in your password, it's actually creating a new wallet for you. So if you had the old wallet, the old smart contract, it's basically creating a new account for you, a new wallet. If you didn't have anything in the past, it's also creating it on the fly when you sign up. So there's a lot happening under the hood when that initial login happens.
Okay.
And you're going to want to remember your password, like write it down, because that is what actually encrypts your private key. So we have private key custody and managed wallets. So we make it really easy, just to have simple username and password. But with the caveat is your password actually matters now. And yes, we have a password reset function, but that essentially unlocks your wallet, and you need to submit it once you do that to create a new password that will re-encrypt your wallet. And essentially, so we have a whole system for that, for password recovery and whatnot. but it's a multi-sig wallet, so we're able to with another user unlock and re-encrypt a new wallet. So
Okay. Yeah, I just want to encourage folks, if you do have issues, of course, feel free to, feel free to reach out, and I'm sure the Hero/Tune team will be more than happy to help folks get their issues resolved. So,
yeah, we have also the generic hello@hero.fm email. We also have a no reply at TuneFM. Even though it says no reply, I'll probably get it. So
okay. Right. So yeah, aside from all this stuff, kind of wrapping it back around to, you're a music. I know you're a musician too. What are you doing on the music front these days? Are you able to keep your chops up? Are you able to play? Or are you just kind of, I mean, are there any artists out there that you're really hot on? Talk about the music scene just a little bit since we're there.
yeah, well, before the pandemic hit, I had some good things going on. I was going to some jazz jams, and I was going to collaborate with several people, and there's this recording studio, and I had some good things going on, but all that's sort of on hold right now. There isn't really any
Yeah.
jams or performances or
No,
literally
of course not.
anything
Yeah, of course
anymore.
not.
So
It breaks my heart, but hopefully we get
yeah,
out of this thing fairly unscathed and fairly soon. But yeah,
yeah,
it's a sad state of affairs where we can't go to our favorite venues, see our favorite artists, get together. I mean, from churches to concerts to meeting hall parks. I mean, everything else. We're all struggling through this. There was but we'll
yeah.
make it all right.
So I try and keep it up. Like I'll whip it out every now and again and play something, but
Good.
otherwise it's not great from everything else collaborative wise, but no live shows, no nothing. But hopefully we'll make it to the other side of this and get back to some form of normal.
Right. Yeah, so I haven't heard anything from your brother in a while. What's your brother up to these days? I mean, he spoke with you at Hadera 18, and I haven't heard too much since. What's going on with your brother?
Yeah, so my brother's still involved. He sort of deferred to me to be the public face of things
Sure.
because he's not big into public speaking, if you will. So that's just
Yeah.
his style.
Okay.
He's more on the administrative side of dealing with, a lot of the legal and financial and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things going on
Oh yeah,
in
absolutely.
the background that he's helping out with. Um,
Right.
and
For the sake of time, I won't go into the of course, the regulatory issues is a whole other topic that I'm very interested in because, what we have some questions, within Ledgerama about regulatory issues, but I'll save that for another time. Suffice to say that that's a
yeah,
whole other
that's a whole
conversation.
another meetup. Yep.
Yeah, it is. It is a whole other meetup, and maybe we can circle back. Or what would actually be kind of cool would be to have maybe October. So I've got somebody lined up for September, but maybe October or sometime before the end of the year, I'll circle back around and we'll do a meetup just with a number of other CEOs or CTOs, basically anybody else in the space that wants to come together and talk about regulations. Maybe I'll do that because it's certainly a hot topic, and it's just a very new territory, and you said something to me the other day that made a lot of sense, and I see it is that the regulators don't really know what's going on either. So if we're confused out here building in this industry, well, there's a good reason for that, right? Because the regulators don't know what's going on either. This is all very new and coming heavy, hot and heavy and fast. So
Yeah. And I mean, even before Hedera 18, we started doing a pre-sale, and we had no idea the legal implications we were incurring at the time.
yeah,
But we did a public and a private pre-sale, and later, we have some high-powered lawyers who were basically helping create the legislation for this. They work directly with the SEC and CFTC and selling securities, publicly versus utility. We were very much saying we were utility, but it's unclear at some point when it switches from security to utility and back. And there's a lot of complexity there that I can get into, but bottom line is talk to your lawyers and make sure they're good.
Right. Yeah, and and one thing that we talked about too, and I think it's important to emphasize is just that, the spirit of compliance for companies that are dealing with this. I mean, I've heard that said from regulators too, and read in some of the, some of the legal documentation is just, the regulators themselves, like FinCEN, they admit that there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but that as long as people are keeping in mind, particularly, I mean, if you want to have a public face and, and interact, within the boundaries of the law of the country that you're living in, that spirit of, the spirit of cooperation and compliance, of course, is encouraged, and, we're making it through it. I mean, my hope is that the regulators realize that there's potentially a huge disaster in stifling the kind of innovation and, economic potential, but there's, of course, there's other forces at work too. So, but hopefully, those of us that are building start to get some clarity on the regulatory front, but, it's an ongoing battle.
Yeah, I think the spirit of compliance is a great term, because at the end of the day, that's really all there is. The law is, at the end of the day, based on intent. So if you have malicious intent, or you have the intent to comply, or at least the spirit of compliance, because it's unclear what compliance even means, because the laws haven't been written. So the lawyers are just as confused as everyone else. They're trying to learn this stuff as non-technical folks and create legal frameworks for it, regulatory frameworks. So in many ways, it's still evolving, it's still happening, but if you do everything in your power to do the right thing, and you're not trying to mislead investors, and you're trying to build something that's meaningful, that helps people, the regulators tend to favor you. And if you're trying to do it in the US and you're trying to do it right and not trying to skirt the law or escape things or doing this and that, you don't want to raise any red flags. And really, they just want you to work with them. They want you to come in and explain what you're doing and teach them how to regulate you. So, a lot of it is just meeting directly with the SEC and saying, like, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to do. Like, it's not very clear, like, how this is regulated, but we're here to help you help us. So,
right. And I know there's a lot of resistance to that, particularly in the crypto community, and I totally understand it. Because at times, the regulations that are in place, sometimes they, it feels very stifling. But it's a battle that we've got to fight. If we want to interact with the rest of the world, in a responsible way where we're taken seriously and we can build things that are going to be successful. Unfortunately, there's an aspect of it that we just kind of have to keep in mind, and we don't always like it, but it's something that we live with and deal with. So.
Yep.
Yep. A quick question about the future, and then we'll get ready to start signing off here. 3 years out, where do you want to see Tune.fm? What are you thinking for the future?
Well, in the future, hopefully within a year or two, we are traded on multiple exchanges, some of the biggest ones, Binance, Bittrex, all the big exchanges, that there's a stable price and significant liquidity on all these exchanges.
That's the jam token.
Yeah, the jam token.
Yeah.
In terms of the product, we'd like to build, I've got a long list of features, all kinds of stuff, playlist stuff, radio stuff, visualizer stuff. We want to build all that. We also want to have, desktop app, mobile app, all that kind of thing, omni-channel. And then we really just want the crypto market to start to come back. And we also want, millions more artists and tens of millions more fans. And if we're at that point where we have millions of users, tons of more content, a healthy traded token, and millions of transactions happening all the time, we'll be in a very good place.
So I know that there's, of course, there's a lot of open questions, but in terms of development, how long, what kind of lead are you looking at for really being satisfied? Like you were talking about, the additional features that you want to be building out and those kinds of things. How long, do you have an idea of what you're looking at in terms of time to develop, basically time to develop to where it's really robust and fleshed out in terms of features, and you can say, this is what we wanted to build. How, I know that's kind of maybe a difficult question to answer, but what are your thoughts there?
It's less about time as much as money. Whenever you're trying to develop something with other developers, it's just really expensive. You can go faster, if you spend more money, you can go faster and get things quicker. Things only go slow when you're dealing with no money or building it yourself. And so, our original vision was really broad. And so we're sort of trying to boil the ocean, and we've tried to narrow that down significantly. For example, like live shows and ticketing, all of that was axed a while ago. Like we don't have any of those features, but that was part of the original vision. I guess live shows are all canceled anyway. So,
That's true.
There's so many things that I want to put into the product. I think that if we're able to raise this next round, we'll get a lot of the key stuff in. What we have now is sort of a minimum viable product. It's streaming, it's the music, it's the artists, it's your profiles, pictures, information, tags. There's a lot of features. It's a huge
to quote a famous musician, the music never stops.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, we still have to compete with Spotify and Apple Music. So crypto or no crypto, we're still going up against the big guys. So we're going to have to raise a ton more money and scale up a ton more to get to the point where we're a formidable competitor to these platforms. On the order of millions of users, tens of thousands of artists, and the crypto just sort of has to just work, and everything has to be super seamless. And, the world has to evolve a bit more with crypto comfort, if you will. And the markets have to get better. But if we're in that spot where, all the coolest features that I've thought up or written down are implemented, and the token is, a very healthy, liquid token, that's going up, and we're well capitalized and have a strong team of maybe a dozen or 24 developers working full time, that would be nice. It's not just me and 2 other people, so it's just getting, it's a startup. So hopefully in 3 to 5 years, we'll have achieved all these things, and we'll be talking to Apple and Google and all these folks in a serious way.
Right. Well, best wishes and best of luck in that regard. I think there is a little bit of luck in there. It's all the determination, intelligence in the world, but I do wish you just that little bit of luck that you need to to move it in the way I know all of us in the community want to see it go that way.
Yeah, we're gonna need it.
Yeah.
We'll persevere, but we need a little luck too to make it happen.
So I want to open this up real quick. We've got about 8 minutes left before I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and start winding it down. So I just want to open it up to questions and discussion. And this is kind of the time where, let's see, we got one that came in here. Oh, hey man, knowing what you know now, would you still have made this journey?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I guess I'd have to say yes. It's hard to imagine another path. Um, we are still barreling down the token on Hadera path and crypto marketplace. And it's interesting because when we first started building our fiat marketplace, I had always imagined that we would have some sort of tokenization credit system, um, and involve cryptocurrency. We wanted to accept Bitcoin and Ethereum early on, but the feature got axed. And so yeah, it'd probably be easier to answer that, after we scale up and raise a bunch of money. And it would be an easy yes.
Sure.
But I'm not going to say no at this point. So,
Well, and I'll address that just a little bit based on the conversation that we had the other day. I just kind of candidly asked you. I said, okay, so at the end of the day, are you still happy in playing music, or are you knee deep in misery and code, right? And you immediately came back with a big smile and said, "Nah, you're playing, you're having fun, you're enjoying it." So I think really, from my perspective, the answer to that question is a big yes. I would have done it this way, because you still, you've got a smile, and I can tell that while there's all kinds of things to deal with, that you're handling it in stride and continuing on and fighting that good fight that we all, and of course, we all, we're right there with you, and we want the best for you and your team. And I think I can speak for certainly the majority of the folks that are in channel here that, we're with you, and we're rooting for you all the way.
thanks. Yeah, I guess being a musician and being passionate about music is what has sort of kept this thing alive. But it cuts both ways. It's our strength and weakness. With the music industry being so broken, a lot of people are afraid of it. It's a bit harder to raise money when the entire industry is going down the tubes. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore. But also, sometimes I think if I had gone into another industry, maybe things would have happened quicker. But then again, maybe I would have given up more easily. So it's hard to say. And with crypto, I've always been interested in obviously crypto, but technology and finance. And Tune FM in many ways is the perfect trifecta of music, technology, and finance all in one. And so the Jam token is really the culmination of that. And I wanted the Jam token to be something special, not just a quick and dirty ERC20 Ethereum deployment, which I can do in 5 minutes. I wanted it to be something that was truly unique and better than everything else out there. So, it was a long and winding road to get to where we are now. But I'm sure that's just the beginning. We're just starting, really.
Yep. It is incredible how much time and effort it really takes. That's why that determination, and as Joel mentioned, the passion, right? So starting off with something that you're passionate about, is absolutely crucial. Rob and I are totally, we're in the same boat. It's, we've been at this, we were at Hadera 18 as well, of course, and competed there. And we've been at, going strong since then. But like you said, it's a long and winding road. It's, it's not always easy, but we're passionate about what we do, and we've got that determination. So, you just keep at it and hope for the best. So again, I want to encourage anybody, really, okay, so at this point, see everybody's, still muted. I'm going to go ahead and unmute folks. If you're on mute yourself, I don't know if, of course, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and chime in. I don't know if I may have muted. Let's see, I'm going to unmute. Maybe I can't, but at any rate, well, yeah, so,
Yeah. Question came in.
Yeah.
I just want I've been sitting listening to the entire discussion. I just want to encourage both of you guys to continue marching on. And as you mentioned earlier, 80% of the folks that's on the meetup today got your back, and we're avid fans of what you're doing, and we wish you all the best of luck and success, and perseverance is the key.
I
Thanks a
appreciate
lot,
that.
Bill.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
time. Thank you.
Yeah, all this encouragement is good. I
Well,
need it.
that's part of why I wanted. It's part of why I wanted you to be here. I've said this to a number of people that are close to me. We want you to, we want you to feel how much support there is, from at least from the community. It's a wild and woolly world out there. So sometimes you kind of feel like you're shouting into a vacuum.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but we're still out here. And
It's good to know.
there was another question here from Alex. Would you do anything different if you were starting afresh now? That can be that can be a big question, but let's, if the short and skinny version of it, if you could do anything different, you're starting new now.
It's a hard question, to be honest. I mean, obviously, if we knew all of the issues that we ran into ahead of time, we would have built for them and things would have gone a lot smoother. Yeah, I mean, potentially, I mean, it's hard to say. I can't think of any other competing blockchain or DLT that would be better still to this day. No experience is going to go perfectly without any hiccups. And we wanted to be first, and we knew that we'd run into a lot of issues as a result of being first, the price of being first, but also there's a lot of advantages of being first, especially in crypto. There's a huge premium to the first this or that. I mean, I would like things to move faster, and I wish maybe if I guess I'm trying to come up with something, but maybe if I had focused a bit more on fundraising earlier on, things might have been a little bit easier today. But then again, it's hard to say because you need all the pieces in place before you can raise significant amount of money. So
That's right. Yeah, investors don't care about your idea; they care about traction.
exactly. So we really needed to demonstrate the traction, and we did. And then, that killed us with the max state size thing. And we had to sort of go back to ground zero. And we had a ton of traction. We had over 10,000 new users. We had over 30,000 transactions on the smart contract, all within a few weeks to a few months, which is pretty decent. And we represented over a third of the users on the entire Hadera network.
Right.
And I still think it's still a double-digit percentage because while we might not be the vast majority of transactions, because AdStacks can pump 1 million transactions through one client all day long, but all of our transactions are initiated by actual other users. It's not from us directly. So it's a totally different type of decentralized traction. All of our transactions are coming from decentralized sources. And so it's not like we're submitting, like I can submit 1 billion transactions tomorrow to send a token from one thing to the next and back if I wanted to. It'd be a waste of money. But we were able to demonstrate that this thing works and people are interested in it. And then we sort of, we hit a wall and we had to start all over again. So we're, it's a challenge to go back to 0 transactions and build up that traction again, right, especially with very limited funds, So it's right. We were way better capitalized when we launched at the time. When things were just a normal, simple smart contract. But now that it took us a year, almost 6 months to a year to basically scale things up, hit the wall, re-architect, and start all over again. Now that we started all over again, we're doing everything that we can to get back to where we were, and hopefully build up enough traction and technical sort of expertise to be able to raise the next round to get us to the next stage. So that's the goal.
Right. And hopefully, hopefully anybody watching, that any investors that might come across this, should they come across this, would realize, would take that into consideration that the traction was there, right? So that, you know, so
Oh
it's,
yeah, I mean it's still public. You can go to that old account on Dragon Glass and see it. um,
and then there was another one that came in. So how did you decide the per minute value to compensate the musicians?
that's a good question. So basically, we wanted to peg it to some sort of fiat comparable, and there's this statistic that the average Spotify user streamed about 20 hours of music per month, and it cost them what, $9.99 or whatever. So that was a sort of amount per hour that we went off of. And we priced Jam at a fixed fiat price of 5 cents. And that was basically a premium on top of what we sold Jam to pre-sale investors. And basically, and all that pricing is influenced by the token economics. And so based on the 5 cent price, we pegged it to that. We calculated how much it costs per hour of Spotify for the average user. And basically took that amount and came up with, I think it's 0.2 jam per minute. So we got it down to the minute. And then based on that 5 cent price, basically created a rate at 0.2 per minute. So that rate right now it's fixed only because the token price is fixed. But once the token price is dynamic and it's traded on exchanges, might go from 5 cents to 10 cents to 1 cent, who knows, that rate will be dynamic as well to track the token price to maintain the sort of fiat peg that we have. And it's less of a peg and more of a sort of target, like a comparable that we wanted to at least be on the same level as an existing streaming service. But we could decide to make it, cheaper or more expensive in the future for any number of reasons.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it up here, unless there's anything else that you want to add, Andrew. Of course, before we take off, just a real quickly again, anybody that wants to follow you, read more about your project, help you out, what are the best resources for us to go to so we can really stay on top of what you're doing and help you with the vision.
Yeah, well, definitely check out our Twitter. That's where the most social media action is. We do a Facebook page too, but it gets less posts and less views. So most of our action is on Twitter. And linked out there is our blog, so our Medium, and definitely read the 3 latest articles there. And then our sort of company page, hero.fm, HEARO.fm, that has a sort of ton of information on the original vision for the token, as well as our history prior to all the token stuff, the sort of timeline and the goals, as well as it has a comprehensive list of every news article that was ever written about us, which is many dozens of them. So if you're interested in checking out those articles, that's also in the news section there, as well as the team. If you want to read about the team, or contact any of us, our emails are linked there too. And obviously Tune FM is the main product, so check that out, get your jam tokens. And if you have any issues, just email us at hello@hero.fm and we'll do our best to resolve it.
Okay, awesome. All right, so yeah, so this is, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. Just to kind of briefly, conclude. This has been brought to you by, on behalf of Creative Coast, right? So Creative Coast are the ones that graciously give us the venue. Of course, in normal times, I would be using their venue for the meetups. They do this for us free of charge and have been since after Hadera 18. So that's at thecreativecoast.org. Jen Bonet has been very instrumental in helping me in my journey. So I want to give a quick shout out to her. She's the director of Creative Coast. and my partner and myself, Rob Caines. I'm Jeremy Fletcher. We're from Ledgerama, getting ready to release the Walla Wallet. So we hope everybody will run out. We're currently we still have some slots open for beta testing our digital wallet that we're getting ready to release. We really want to provide a premier experience for users of Hedera Hashgraph, and we think that we're doing that. Of course, there's, it's like yours, like your project, the music never stops, but we think that we think that we've got something that the Hadera community will find very valuable. So we look forward to hearing more from people on that end. And other than that, I'm going to go ahead. Before the very last thing, we do this every first Monday of the month. So anybody out there that's still watching, please join us. It's the first Monday of every month, and you can reach out to the Creative Coast. Next month, I've got Mike McDonald. I almost called him Mac McDonald. Mike McDonald from 3IEIO. They were the third place winners in the Hadera 20 hackathon. They were also out at Hadera 18, so really happy to see Michael McDonald and their team still continuing on. He's going to be joining us for the September meetup. And then after that, my goal is to have folks like yourself, Andrew, join us every month. So at some point, I imagine, hopefully we can get Pablo and all the rest of the crew on here. And hopefully, you'll join us too. And I'll be sure to make sure that you've got the information on the upcoming meetups, Andrew. So I know that you're a Hadera ambassador as well. And, of course, I would love to have you join us and, co-host or just hang out and listen or, whatever it is, we're happy to have you as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Joel, Robert, Jason, Glenn, Alex.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for everyone's encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. We look forward to hearing more.